My name's Rachel, I'm 27, and I live just outside Austin, Texas. By day, I work as a junior architect at a mid-sized design firm, sketching dreams into blueprints. But beneath the determination I wear like armor, I've always been too eager to please, especially when it came to my family. That flaw nearly destroyed me the night my father laughed in my face, called me useless, and handed my sister the keys to a brand new Tesla. They said I'd never amount to anything. They mocked me while celebrating her. But hours later, I was the one holding the mansion keys, and they had no idea what was coming. If you're watching, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Has your family ever favored someone else while making you feel invisible? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever proven them wrong. I'd love to hear your story. Now, to understand why that night shattered me and how I found the strength to turn humiliation into power, you need to know the weeks leading up to it. This wasn't just another family dinner. It was the culmination of years of quiet dismissals, favoritism, and cracks that had been forming long before Tesla ever appeared in the driveway. Austin summers have a way of sticking to your skin. Even in late September, the air feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. That evening, as the cicadas droned outside and the sky blushed pink, I pulled my blazer tight around me. More for courage than for comfort. My sister, Claire, was already in the kitchen when I arrived at my parents' house. She had that glow, perfect makeup, perfect hair, the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. Claire had always been the golden child. Smarter? Not really. More hardworking? Definitely not. But charming? Effortlessly. Dad adored her. Mom defended her. And me? I was the afterthought. "Rachel," Dad called as I stepped in, his voice booming from the living room. "You're late." "I came straight from work," I explained, setting down my bag. My sketches and measuring tape were still tucked inside, evidence of the long day I'd had. Claire smirked from the counter, sipping a glass of wine. "Always working, huh?" "You should relax more. It's not like your little projects matter that much." I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but Dad's laugh cut me off. "She's right, Rachel. You work yourself into the ground, but what do you have to show for it?" "Nothing big. Nothing lasting." His words stung, sharper than I expected, because no matter how many blueprints I drew, how many nights I stayed late at the office, it never seemed to matter to him. That night, though, he had something planned. Something that would rip open the quiet insecurities I'd been burying for years. Dinner was laid out like a celebration. Roast chicken, buttery rolls, Mom's famous pecan pie. I sat down at the long oak table, the same one we'd eaten at since childhood, the one carved with memories I thought were ours. But as the plates clattered and conversation flowed, Dad clapped his hands together. "I have an announcement." Claire beamed before he even spoke, like she already knew what was coming. Dad stood, reaching into his pocket. A set of car keys gleamed in the chandelier light. "To my brilliant, beautiful daughter, Claire, congratulations on your promotion. You deserve this." He dropped the keys into her hand. "A Tesla. It's parked out front." The table erupted in applause. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Claire squealed, hugging him like she'd just won the lottery. "And me?" I froze, my fork hovered above my plate. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Wait," I whispered. "A Tesla?" Dad turned to me, his smile already fading. "Yes, for Claire. She's proven herself. She's going places, but I just got chosen to co-lead the Greenfield project at work. It's one of the biggest contracts our firm has landed this year." Claire laughed, her voice dripping with mockery. "Oh, please. Drawing up plans for an office building isn't the same as making real money." "Don't embarrass yourself," Dad chuckled, shaking his head. "She's right, Rachel. You work hard, but hard work doesn't equal results. You're not Claire." "You never were, Dad. Are you serious?" His eyes locked on mine, cold, certain. "You're useless, Rachel. Always have been." The word cut through me like glass. Mom flinched but said nothing. Claire smirked, twirling the keys around her finger. The sound of metal jingling felt like mock applause. I swallowed hard, forcing the tears back, my throat burning. They didn't see me, not the late nights, not the sacrifices, not the grit. To them, I was nothing more than a shadow behind Claire's glow. But what none of them knew, what not even Claire suspected, was that while she was flaunting her new Tesla, I already held something far greater. Something that would shatter their smug little world and make them regret ever calling me useless. Because that same night, I'd walk away holding the mansion keys, and that was only the beginning. Growing up in Austin, I used to believe that family meant safety. That the walls of our suburban home, with its wide porch and oak trees shading the driveway, would always shelter me. But as I got older, I realized those walls had cracks. Cracks that widened every time my father looked at me with disappointment and at Claire with pride. Claire and I were only 2 years apart, but we might as well have lived on different planets. She was the golden child from the very beginning. When she brought home a B in math, Dad said, "Don't worry, honey, grades don't define you." When I brought home an A, he frowned. Why not an A+? It wasn't just school. Everything was tilted in her favor. Claire got the new bike with pink streamers on the handlebars. I got the hand-me-down with a squeaky chain. Claire got ballet lessons at the best studio. I was told to stick with track because running didn't require tuition. Mom tried, sometimes, to balance things out. I remember her sneaking into my room with a cupcake when Dad threw Claire a bigger birthday party. Or the way she'd slip me a $20 bill before field trips because she knew I'd never ask. But even her quiet kindness couldn't drown out Dad's favoritism. His love was loud and showy for Claire. His criticisms were louder, for me. The irony? Claire never even wanted the things she was handed. Ballet bored her. She quit track after 2 meets. Even when she got her first car, a brand new Honda at 16, she barely drove it. Meanwhile, I was begging for gas money just to get to my part-time job at the local library. Still, I told myself it was fine. I told myself that one day I'd prove him wrong. I threw myself into work, into school, into building a future he couldn't ignore. Architecture became my lifeline. I loved the idea of designing something that lasted, something no one could dismiss as useless. By college, I was juggling internships, night classes, and part-time jobs. Claire? She partied through business school, barely scraping by, but Dad praised her anyway. "She has charisma," he said once, loud enough for me to hear. "Charisma gets you further than hard work." That line stuck with me. Burned into me, because no matter how many hours I put in, no matter how much I achieved, it was never enough to outshine her glow in his eyes. Our family had traditions, Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, summer barbecues, but even those felt like stages where Claire played the star and I stood in the wings. At Thanksgiving, Dad would raise a toast to Claire's bright future. At Christmas, the biggest present was always hers, wrapped in gold paper, sitting under the tree like a crown. Me? I got sweaters, practical, forgettable, but I stayed quiet. I told myself kindness was strength, that if I just kept showing up, kept proving myself, they'd see. They'd understand, except they never did. By the time I was 25, I had earned my degree, landed a stable job, and was working my way up in a firm known for cutting-edge designs. I'd pulled all-nighters, missed holidays, and even skipped dating just to keep climbing. My reward? Dad casually mentions to his golf buddies that Rachel's doing fine, then spends 20 minutes bragging about Claire's newest hobby like she'd reinvented the wheel. Claire thrived in the spotlight. She knew she was the favorite, and she wielded it like a weapon. At dinners, she'd mock my deadlines. "Still working late, Rachel? Don't you get tired of being invisible?" She'd say it with a laugh, like it was harmless. But it wasn't harmless. It was poison, dripping slowly into my veins. Mom would glance at me sometimes, her eyes soft with apology, but she never spoke up. And Dad? He just chuckled. "She's only teasing," he'd say, pouring himself another drink. But the teasing wasn't just teasing. It was dismissed. It was erasure. And as much as it hurt, I kept hoping for that one day, the day he'd finally look at me with pride. The day he'd finally say, "Rachel, I'm proud of you." That's why the night of the Tesla hit so hard. Because deep down, I'd believed I still had a chance to earn it. To prove him wrong. To matter. But standing there in the glow of chandelier light, watching Claire twirl those keys, I finally saw it clearly. I was never going to be enough for him. Not in his world. Not in his eyes. And that realization nearly broke me. But what I didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the cracks in our family weren't just in me. They were in him. In the choices he made, in the secrets he thought no one saw. And soon those cracks would shatter wide open. The Tesla night didn't come out of nowhere. Looking back, the signs were always there. Small slights, offhand comments, choices that showed me exactly where I stood. I just didn't want to see them. One of the earliest was on my 24th birthday. Mom had baked me a cake, her frosting uneven but made with love. We gathered around the dining room table, the same one we'd eaten at since I was a kid. I blew out the candles, heart pounding with a single wish. Maybe, just maybe, Dad would finally say something that felt like pride. He clapped politely and said, "Well, you're almost at a quarter century. Don't waste too much time before you settle down. Claire's already bringing real value to the family." Claire giggled, looping her arm through his. "Don't worry, Dad. Some people bloom late." The table laughed. I did too, but my throat burned with the effort. My birthday wish went out like smoke. It only got worse after Claire graduated from college. She hadn't earned top marks. In fact, she barely scraped by, but Dad rewarded her with a trip to Italy to expand her horizons. I remember standing in the driveway that day, watching as he loaded her suitcases into the trunk. I'd just pulled a 60-hour week at the firm. My eyes were bleary from drafting plans, my hands aching from sketching. He looked at me over the roof of the car and said, "Don't work yourself into the ground, Rachel. You'll just end up bitter." Claire leaned out the window, sunglasses perched on her perfect nose. "Bye, sis. Bring me back some wine when you make it big as a secretary." Dad chuckled at her joke. He actually chuckled. That's when I started realizing this wasn't just favoritism. This was cruelty, dressed up as tradition. At Sunday dinners, the digs became sharper. Claire would brag about her new friends, her new clothes, her new opportunities. Dad hung on every word. When I tried to share news, like my first big promotion, he waved it off. "Good for you," he'd mutter, eyes already back on Claire. One night, I told them I was leading a project that might make the cover of Architecture Digest. My chest buzzed with excitement as I said it, but Dad just raised his wine glass. "Well, designing buildings is nice, Rachel. But it's not legacy. Legacy is building a family, carrying a name forward." Claire smirked across the table. "Guess that makes me the legacy, huh?" I froze, my fork hovering midair. Mom shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. Ethan, my boyfriend back then, squeezed my hand under the table. But the damage was done, the cruelest part. Claire knew exactly how to twist the knife. She didn't just accept Dad's favoritism, she weaponized it. One afternoon, I stopped by the house to pick up some old photo albums for Mom. Claire was lounging in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "Dad's in his study," she said without looking up. Then, with a sly smile, "Don't bother showing him your new promotion." He says architecture is just decorating with concrete. My stomach dropped. "He said that?" She smirked, her eyes glittering. "Why do you even care what he thinks?" "You know you'll never be me," I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her. But instead, I carried the albums out the door, my heart thudding with shame. That night, lying awake in my apartment, her words echoed, "You'll never be me." And the worst part was, I believed her, but the biggest crack came just before the Tesla. Dad had invited both of us to his office one evening. His firm occupied a towering glass building downtown, the kind of place that screamed old money. I thought maybe he wanted to finally talk about succession, about the future. I sat across from him at his mahogany desk, clutching my portfolio. I'd prepared sketches, blueprints, everything to show him how serious I was about investing in my own projects. about building something lasting. He barely looked at them. Rachel, this is fine. But architecture is a service, not a legacy. Clients hire you, then forget your name. Before I could argue, he turned to Claire. But you, honey, you have vision. You have charisma. You're the one I see carrying our name forward. Claire tilted her head, smiling at me like a cat with cream. Sorry, sis. Guess some of us are just born for it. I sat there, numb, the blueprints trembling in my hands. He didn't even notice. Or maybe he did, and didn't care. That night, I walked out of his office into the cold night air, my chest hollow. And I realized something terrifying. In his eyes, I wasn't just lesser. I was invisible. So when the Tesla night finally came, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. But surprise isn't something you can turn off. The laughter, the keys glinting in Claire's hand, Dad's proud smirk, it all landed like a blade. And as the weight of their words pressed down, I felt something inside me fracture, because this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was erasure, and erasure has a way of creating fury. The night it all shattered started like any other family gathering. Dad had called it a special dinner. His voice over the phone was clipped but smug. Be on time, Rachel. This one's important. I arrived early as usual. That's the thing about being invisible. You cling to punctuality, to perfection, hoping maybe if you do everything right, someone will finally see you. The house glowed from the driveway, every window spilling golden light. Inside, laughter echoed. Claire's laughter. When I stepped into the foyer, Mom smiled weakly. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the living room. They're already gathered. They? I asked, shrugging off my coat. She hesitated. Some of Dad's colleagues. Friends from the firm. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just family. This was an audience. The dining room sparkled like a stage. Crystal glasses, polished silver, a centerpiece of roses so red they looked painted. Dad stood at the head of the table, his hand resting proudly on Claire's shoulder. There she is, he boomed when he saw me. Rachel, sit. Tonight's a big night. I slid into a chair, Ethan beside me. His hand brushed mine under the table, steadying me. Claire beamed, basking in the glow of the room. She wore a silk dress, her hair in soft curls. She looked like the star of a show, and I already knew who the director was. Dinner passed in a blur of chatter. Dad's colleagues toasted to new deals, Mom kept pouring wine, and Claire kept dropping little jokes at my expense. Rachel works so hard, she said sweetly at one point. She's practically married to her drafting table. The table chuckled. I forced a smile, my stomach burning, but I had no idea the real humiliation hadn't even started yet. After dessert, Dad cleared his throat. The room fell quiet. He rose, lifting a small black box in one hand. I want to mark tonight with something special, he announced, his voice booming with pride. A gift for my daughter, who has made me proud every single day. My heart stuttered. For a moment, just a moment, I thought maybe, impossibly, he meant me. He turned to Claire. Stand up, sweetheart. She rose, grinning. He opened the box and pulled out a set of sleek silver keys. A gasp rippled through the room. A Tesla, Dad declared, his chest puffed. Brand new. Custom interior. For the daughter who embodies the family legacy. The room erupted in applause. My fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. The sound cut through the laughter, sharp as a gunshot. Claire squealed, rushing into Dad's arms. Daddy, oh my God! You're the best! I sat frozen, the applause crashing over me like waves. Then it happened. Dad turned, catching my stunned expression. And instead of softening, instead of realizing the cruelty, he laughed. A deep, booming laugh. Don't pout, Rachel, he said loudly, so the whole table could hear. Not everyone can be the star. Some of us are just support players, and that's okay. The room chuckled. Heat flooded my face. My ears roared. Support player? After everything I'd done? After years of clawing my way up, fighting for every scrap of recognition? Claire twirled the keys in her fingers, smirking. Don't worry, sis. Maybe next year you'll get one of the old company cars. If you work hard enough. More laughter. Ethan shifted beside me, fury sparking in his eyes. That's enough, he muttered. But Dad ignored him. Instead, he raised his glass in a mock toast. To Claire, the daughter who makes us proud. And to Rachel, he paused, grinning, for always trying. The words hit like a blade. I felt them sink deep, tearing something vital inside me. The table erupted in laughter again. Glasses clinked. Applause rang. And me? I sat in silence, my hands trembling under the table, my throat locked tight. In that moment, something inside me fractured. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even jealousy. It was rage, cold, coiled, simmering beneath my skin, but I couldn't show it. Not yet, so I lifted my glass, my hand steady despite the fire in my chest, and forced a smile. To Claire, I whispered. My voice didn't shake, but my soul did, because as their laughter echoed around me, I realized the truth. I wasn't just excluded. I wasn't just forgotten. I was being erased, and erasure demands an answer. The drive home that night felt endless. Ethan's hand rested on the wheel, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I stared out the passenger window, watching the blur of city lights, my reflection fractured against the glass. Nobody spoke. Not him. Not me. Inside, I was screaming. Dad's laughter still echoed in my ears, that booming sound as he called me useless in front of everyone. The image of Claire twirling those keys played on loop in my mind, her smirk slicing deeper than any blade. By the time we reached our apartment, my chest was tight, my throat raw. Ethan killed the engine and turned to me. Rachel, he said softly, his voice shaking. What your father did, what Claire did, it was cruel. You don't deserve that, I swallowed, forcing a brittle smile. It's fine. He grabbed my hand, desperate. No, it's not fine. Don't say that. They humiliated you, my composure cracked. The tears I'd fought all night spilled over, hot and relentless. I should be used to it by now, I whispered. It's always the same story. Claire gets the spotlight. I get the scraps. He pulled me into his arms, and for a moment I let myself break against him. But deep down, even his comfort couldn't stitch the pieces of me back together, because it wasn't just about a car. It wasn't about Claire. It was about the way my own father looked me in the eye and told a room full of people that I was nothing. The days that followed blurred. I went to work, but my sketches came out flat. My designs, once bold and full of life, looked hollow, lifeless, like reflections of someone else's ideas. My team noticed. You okay, Rachel? One of my interns asked, hovering by my desk. Fine, I lied, staring at the blank page in front of me. But I wasn't fine. Everywhere I looked, reminders taunted me. Billboards flashing Teslas as status symbols. Social media posts of Claire posing beside her new car. Hashtags dripping with arrogance. Best dad ever, blessed, living the dream. Each post was a knife twist. And worse? Hundreds of comments praising her, praising him. Not one mention of me. I stopped eating properly. I stopped answering text. Even my mom's calls went to voicemail. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, the dark pressing in, that poisonous whisper creeping back into my head. Maybe he's right. Maybe you are useless. One night, Ethan found me sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., my knees pulled to my chest, my eyes swollen from crying. He knelt beside me, his voice breaking. Rachel, you can't let them do this to you. You're stronger than this, I shook my head. No, I'm not. If I were, it wouldn't hurt this much. He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. It hurts because you care, because you've been carrying their rejection for years. But listen to me, you are not useless. You've built a career, a life, a reputation. With no one's help. That makes you extraordinary. His words should have lifted me. But in that moment, they only made me cry harder. Because I didn't believe him. Not yet. The breaking point came a week later. Claire posted a video of Dad surprising her with the Tesla, her shrieks of joy, his proud smile, the champagne toasts in their marble kitchen. It went viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of comments. People envied her perfect family, and there I was, sitting alone in my dark apartment, phone glowing in my hand, watching the world applaud the very moment that had destroyed me. Something inside me cracked wide open. I hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, the screen splintering into pieces. Then I collapsed. On the floor, sobbing until my body shook, my voice ragged and raw. For the first time in years, I felt completely powerless. Maybe I am nothing. I whispered into the emptiness. The silence that followed was suffocating. But then, through the blur of tears, my eyes caught something. A framed photo on the bookshelf. Standing in front of my very first finished project, a modest but beautiful suburban home. My smile that day was wide, unguarded. My eyes shone with pride. I dragged myself across the floor and picked it up, clutching it to my chest. That woman in the photo, she wasn't useless. She was brave. She had taken scraps of opportunity and built something real, something lasting. She had fought through doubt, through rejection, through every no her father had ever thrown her way. And for the first time since that dinner, I felt a flicker, small, fragile, but real. A spark. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand and whispered into the darkness. "I won't stay broken," the words trembled. But they carried weight. I repeated them louder. "I won't stay broken." And with each repetition, the spark grew, steady and fierce. Because if they wanted to see me as useless, then I would show them exactly how wrong they were, not with words, with action, with proof. And in that moment, I knew. The girl who had walked out of that dinner humiliated was gone. In her place stood someone ready to fight back. The morning after my breakdown, I woke with swollen eyes but a steady pulse. For the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't drowning, it was buzzing, clear, focused. I moved through the apartment in silence, gathering scraps of paper, sticky notes, and even napkins from the nightstand. I spread them across the kitchen table like blueprints for a war, because that's what this was now. A war not with guns, not with fists, but with strategy. If Dad wanted to see me as useless, if Claire wanted to laugh while holding shiny new keys, then I'd show them just how dangerous useless could be. The first step was knowledge. I scheduled a meeting with Ms. Alvarez, a real estate lawyer I'd worked with on previous projects. She was sharp, no nonsense, and discreet. When I arrived at her office, she gestured for me to sit, her eyes narrowing. "Rachel, you look like hell." I gave a dry laugh. "That's because I've been through it." "I need your help." She leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "Tell me." I told her everything. The dinner, the Tesla, the word useless echoing in my skull. By the time I finished, her jaw was tight, her eyes flashing with fury. "They humiliated you," she said flatly. "Yes," I admitted. "But humiliation doesn't last forever. Leverage does. I want to know what Dad's hiding. His assets, his investments, any cracks in the empire he worships." She tilted her head. "You're planning something." I met her gaze. "I'm planning everything." She sat back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Then let's start digging." The second step was allies. That night, after closing time, I called my project manager, Devin, into my office. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Boss, you've been different lately. What's going on?" I hesitated. Then I told him the truth. Not the soft, polished version. The raw, ugly one. His face hardened. "They really called you useless?" "Yes," I said. My voice shook, but my spine stayed straight. He slammed his hand against the desk. "That's insane. You're the reason half of us have jobs, Rachel. You built this from nothing. You're—" He stopped, his throat tightening. "You're not useless. You're a damn force," I exhaled slowly. "Then help me prove it. Quietly. I want records, property reports, anything we can find about my father's holdings. He guards his empire like a crown jewel, but I know there are cracks. And I want to find them. Devin nodded. Say no more. We'll uncover every skeleton in that man's closet. The third step was control. I couldn't afford to let emotion run the show. Not anymore. So I started journaling every night. Fears, doubts, but also plans. Lists of what I needed to gather. Names of people who owed me favors. Old contacts in finance, architecture, and even city planning. Each night, as the pages filled, I felt less like the broken girl from that dinner and more like someone dangerous. Someone my father would never see coming. The first real lead came 2 weeks later. Ms. Alvarez called me at dawn. Rachel, you might want to sit down for this. I gripped the phone tighter. What is it? Your father's been overextending. Properties leveraged, loans stacked. On paper, he looks untouchable. But in reality, he's one shaky investment away from collapse. My breath caught. Are you serious? As serious as foreclosure papers, she said. If the right people knew how vulnerable he really is, his reputation would crumble. For a moment, I just sat there stunned. All my life, Dad had seemed invincible. A king in his marble castle. And yet, behind the facade, his empire was fragile, propped up by arrogance and borrowed time. And me? I finally had a weapon. The final step was the stage. If I wanted to expose him, it couldn't be in whispers or shadows. It had to be public. I needed an audience. That's when the idea hit me. A gala. Every year, my father hosted a summer fundraiser in his mansion, a glittering event where he flaunted his wealth, his influence, his family. It was his crown jewel, the night when he reminded everyone of his power. But this year, I'd beat him to it. I'd host my own event. Exclusive, elegant. And when the time was right, I'd deliver the truth like a blade through silk. Not only would I prove I wasn't useless, I'd show the world who I really was. Ethan noticed the change in me almost immediately. One night, as we sat on the couch, takeout containers spread between us, he studied me with wary eyes. You're planning something, he said quietly. I set down my chopsticks, meeting his gaze. Do you trust me? Of course, he said without hesitation. Then don't ask too many questions. Just be ready when I say it's time. He leaned back, exhaling. Rachel, whatever this is, just don't lose yourself in it. I smiled faintly, though it didn't reach my eyes. Don't worry. I'm not losing myself. I'm finally finding her. By the end of that week, the invitations were designed. Thick, embossed cards with golden lettering, an evening of vision and resilience. Hosted by Rachel Morgan, I could already picture Dad's face when the envelope landed in his mailbox, and Claire's smirk when she realized she wasn't the star of the evening. The trap was set. The only question now was, who would fall hardest? The day the invitations went out, I felt like I'd crossed an invisible line. For weeks, I'd been planning quietly, pulling strings in the shadows. But now the countdown had begun. Each gold-embossed envelope carried more than an invitation. It carried a warning. Because when you tell a man like my father that you've built something he can't ignore, you don't just stir curiosity, you stir fear. The first ripple came quicker than I expected. 3 days after mailing the invitations, I walked into my office and found Devin grinning from ear to ear, a stack of papers in his hand. You're not going to believe this, he said. Dropping them on my desk, I scanned the headlines. Articles about my gala, whispers in business blogs. Even a local paper had run a piece. Rachel Morgan hosts exclusive event. Independent success story gains ground. My breath caught. Already? Devin nodded. You've been underestimated for so long, Rachel. People are hungry for your story. They love the idea of the underdog hosting her own power night. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not the shaky, brittle smile I'd worn at that humiliating dinner. A real one. It was working. That evening, I decided to test the waters. I accidentally ran into Claire at one of the boutiques she loved downtown. She was holding up a sequined dress in front of a mirror when she spotted me. Her lips curled instantly. "Rachel, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be shopping at, I don't know, thrift stores?" I forced a calm smile. "Funny. I'm here looking for something for the gala." Her eyes narrowed. "What gala?" I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Oh, you didn't get the invitation yet? Must have been delayed. I'm hosting an event next month. Big names, journalists, investors, the works." For the first time, I saw Claire's smirk falter. Just slightly. She tried to cover it, laughing harshly. "An event? You? What could you possibly be celebrating?" I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "Success, Claire. The kind you can't buy with Daddy's credit card." Her face flushed. And for once, she had no comeback. I walked out of the boutique with my head high, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor like victory drums. But it wasn't just about rattling Claire. The true test came when whispers of my event reached Dad. A week later, Ms. Alvarez called me. "Rachel," she said, her tone dry, "guess who's suddenly moving money around?" My pulse quickened. "Him?" "Yup, your father's shifting assets, liquidating accounts. He's nervous, which means he's paying attention." I couldn't stop the grin that spread across my face. "Good. Let him sweat." The momentum was building. At the restaurant that night, Marcus pulled me aside. "Boss, I just overheard 2 of your father's clients talking at table 6. They're wondering if you might be the next big name in hospitality." "Not him. You." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something stronger. Pride. For years, Dad had told me I was nothing. Now people were whispering that I could eclipse him. It wasn't the final blow, but it was a taste. A small win, and it was delicious. Of course, not everything went smoothly. 2 days later, I came home to find Ethan pacing the living room, his jaw tight. "Rachel," he said, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. "My dad left this at the apartment. He says you're embarrassing the family with this." "Stunt," I sighed, sinking onto the couch. "Of course he'd call it that." Ethan sat beside me, his eyes filled with worry. "I support you. You know that. But I need to ask, how far are you willing to take this?" I met his gaze, my voice steady. "As far as I have to, until they can never call me useless again." He swallowed hard. "Then I'm with you. No matter what." I reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Thank you. Because this is just the beginning." The next week was a blur of preparation. Menus crafted. Decor designed. Guest lists finalized. But the most satisfying moment came the night Devin walked into my office, holding up a folder. "What's this?" I asked. He smirked. "Proof. Solid proof. Your father's company is drowning in debt. Loans stacked on loans. He's been bluffing the whole time." I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. Each document was another crack in the empire. I whispered, This could ruin him." Devin nodded. "Exactly. And when the time comes, we'll decide just how hard to pull the rug." The night before the gala, I stood in the empty ballroom of my restaurant. Golden chandeliers sparkled above polished floors. Tables gleamed, set with silver and crystal. It wasn't just a room. It was a stage, and tomorrow night, my family would walk straight into it. I whispered to the silence, "You wanted me to be nobody." "Well, nobody's about to make you irrelevant," the words echoed back. Steady and strong. The morning of the gala, I woke with a weight in my chest, not fear, not dread, but something heavier. Anticipation. For weeks, I had been building toward this night. Every menu item, every floral arrangement, every whispered hint in the right ear had led to this moment. Tonight wasn't just an event. It was the reckoning, and as I slipped into the silk gown Lily had helped me choose, sleek, ivory, commanding, I knew I wasn't dressing as the girl who used to beg for her father's approval. I was dressing as the woman who was about to strip him away. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom hummed with life. Crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across polished floors. Strings of violins floated through the air as waiters moved with precision, serving champagne and canapes. Guests whispered and laughed. The their voices a symphony of curiosity. I scanned the crowd and spotted familiar faces, business owners, journalists, even a city councilwoman. They weren't here for my father. They were here for me. But then, like a shadow cutting through light, they arrived. My father, sharp in his tailored suit, his smirk intact, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. My mother, dripping in jewels, her chin lifted as though she still believed she could will the world into submission. And Claire, my sister, clad in sequins, clutching a glass of champagne like a weapon, her smirk aimed directly at me. The room shifted. Guests parted as they entered, whispers rising like smoke. I lifted my chin. "Welcome," I said smoothly, forcing warmth into my voice. "I'm glad you could make it." My father's lips twitched. "Wouldn't miss it," he said dryly. "Curious to see what kind of circus you've put together." I only smiled. "Oh, it's no circus. It's history." Dinner was served, each course more extravagant than the last. Lobster bisque, duck confit, truffle risotto. The guests murmured praise, clinking glasses. Across the table, I watched my father's smirk flicker every time someone complimented the meal. He was used to being the man people gravitated toward. Tonight, the attention was shifting, and he hated it. Claire leaned in at one point, her voice dripping with disdain. "Lovely food, Rachel. Did you cook it yourself, or just play dress-up as a hostess?" I didn't flinch. "Neither," I said calmly. "I hired professionals. Because unlike some people, I know how to build a team instead of riding my father's coattails." Her smirk cracked. A small win. But the bigger blow was still waiting. At last, Marcus tapped a glass. "Silencing the room. Ladies and gentlemen," he announced. "Our host would like to say a few words." My heart pounded as I rose, smoothing the silk gown. All eyes turned to me. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of success, it's a celebration of resilience. For years I was told I was useless, that I had no future, that I would never measure up." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I glanced at my father. His jaw tightened. I continued, "But useless daughters don't build empires. Useless daughters don't create jobs, sign contracts, or host nights like this." The applause was instant, warm, swelling around me. I raised my hand gently, silencing them. "And since tonight is about truth, I think it's time we revealed some." I nodded to Ms. Chen, who stepped forward from the side of the room, holding a leather-bound folder. She laid it on the table in front of my father with a sharp thud. "This," I said clearly, my voice carrying, "is a detailed record of financial mismanagement, falsified filings, and reckless investments. Proof that the so-called empire my father built is nothing more than smoke and mirrors." Gasps filled the room, my father's face drained of color. He flipped the folder open, scanning furiously before snapping it shut. "This is a stunt, fabricated." But Ms. Chen stepped closer, her voice firm. "Every page is verified. Copies are already with the appropriate authorities." Whispers spread like wildfire. Investors exchanged uneasy glances. Journalists scribbled furiously. My mother's hand gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "And me?" I stood tall, my voice unwavering. "For years, you called me useless. Tonight, I show you what useless really looks like." The silence was heavy, electric. Then slowly, applause began. It started with one guest, then another, until the entire ballroom roared with claps and cheers. My father sat frozen, the mask he'd worn my entire life cracking in front of everyone who had ever worshipped him. He tried to rise, to regain control. "This isn't over," he growled. I leaned in, my voice low but sharp enough for everyone to hear. "No, Dad, it's just beginning." Claire shot to her feet, furious. "You think this makes you better than us? You humiliate your own family for applause?" I turned to her calmly. "No, Claire. I expose the truth. If the truth humiliates you, that's not my fault. That's yours." The crowd erupted again, this time with laughter. At her, not me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the punchline. I was the headline. As the applause swelled, I glanced at Ethan. He was standing at the edge of the room, pride blazing in his eyes. In that moment, I knew I had won the battle. But as I turned back, my father's glare sliced through me. His lips curled into a whisper meant only for me. "You've made powerful enemies tonight, Rachel. And powerful enemies don't forgive." The applause faded. But its echo stayed with me long after the last guest left the ballroom. I stood alone in the quiet space, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet, surrounded by empty champagne glasses and wilted orchids. The chandeliers still glittered overhead, but the silence was heavy. I had done it. I had turned their laughter into gasps, their scorn into respect. I had taken back everything they'd stolen from me, so why did I feel hollow? The next morning, the storm broke. The video of my speech, someone had captured the entire moment on their phone, spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was all over social media. Entrepreneur destroys father's empire at gala. From useless to unstoppable, Rachel Carter's rise. Journalists flooded my inbox with requests for interviews. Investors who had once ignored me suddenly wanted meetings. My restaurant, my catering company, my name. It was everywhere. But with every headline praising me, another was condemning him. By noon, whispers of financial collapse had begun. By evening, local news ran a segment exposing the debts Ms. Chen had uncovered. The law firm, my father's pride, his legacy, was bleeding clients. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt conflicted. Ethan found me sitting in our living room, the glow of the TV painting my face as anchors spoke my name. "You did it," he said softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. I nodded, but my throat tightened. "I don't know if I feel proud or cruel." He knelt in front of me, taking my hands. "Rachel, they tore you down for years. They called you useless. They mocked everything you built. You didn't destroy them, they destroyed themselves. You just showed the world the truth." I wanted to believe him, but deep down a tiny voice whispered, "You wanted this." You wanted to see them break. The phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. It was Claire. Her voice was shaky, nothing like the sharp, confident sister I'd grown up with. "Rachel, I don't know what to do. Everything's collapsing. Dad's furious. Mom won't leave her room. People won't stop calling me. I'm humiliated." I gripped the phone tighter. "Claire, do you remember what you called me that night?" A nobody? Silence. Then a quiet, broken whisper. "I'm sorry." The words I'd dreamed of hearing for years. But instead of satisfaction, I felt an ache. Because it wasn't an apology. It was desperation. "I can't fix what Dad did," I said slowly. "But you chose to laugh with him. That's something you'll have to live with." She started to cry softly before the line went dead. 2 days later, I received a letter, handwritten, from my father. "Rachel, you think you've won. But you'll learn what power truly is when the applause fades and the knives come out. You've humiliated me, but this story isn't finished." Dad, I read it twice, my stomach twisting. Ethan saw my face pale as I set the letter down. "What is it?" I slid it toward him. He read it, jaw tightening. "Rachel, don't let this scare you. He's desperate. He's trying to claw back control." But late that night, lying awake, I replayed his words. The knives come out. Meanwhile, my mother stayed silent. No calls, no letters, just absence. Marcus came into my office one evening, dropping a newspaper on my desk. "They sold their summer house," he said. "And their yacht. People are saying they're drowning in debt." I scanned the article, the headline bold, "The Fall of Rachel Morgan." The photo was worse. My father, once towering and smug, now looked smaller, older, beaten. My chest ached. This was what I had wanted. Justice, exposure, a reversal of power. But staring at that image, I realized revenge doesn't heal old wounds. It doesn't erase the little girl who begged for his love. It just proves he'll never give it. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the city skyline, Ethan and I sat on the balcony. "You seem far away," he murmured. "I thought this would feel like victory," I admitted. "But it feels more like ashes," he squeezed my hand. "Maybe that's because you're not like them. They thrive on humiliation. You wanted closure. And now, maybe, you're realizing closure doesn't come from watching someone else fall. It comes from choosing what comes next." His words settled in my chest. Heavy, true. That night, I walked into the restaurant alone after hours. The chandeliers glowed faintly, casting shadows across empty tables. I sat at one, tracing the edge of the linen with my fingers, whispering to the silence. "Am I free yet?" The room didn't answer. But deep inside I knew I wasn't finished. I had shattered their world, yes. But unless I chose how to close this chapter, their voices would linger forever. The morning after I sat alone in my restaurant, I woke with a strange clarity. The storm was behind me. My father's empire was crumbling. My sister was scrambling, and my mother had vanished into silence. But me, I was still here, standing, breathing, building. For the first time, I realized that revenge had given me a voice, but only I could decide what I wanted to say with it. Weeks passed, and the noise began to fade. Reporters moved on to fresher scandals. Investors called with opportunities, but I was careful, choosing only partnerships that aligned with my values. Business boomed, yes, but the real victory wasn't the contracts or the headlines. It was quiet. The peace of walking into my restaurant and seeing staff laughing, customers smiling, and knowing I had created this world myself. I didn't need my father's approval. I never had. Then, one chilly evening, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Claire, my sister. Her eyes were red, her coat wrinkled, her voice trembling. "Rachel, please, can we talk?" We sat in my living room, the weight of years pressing down between us. Finally, she whispered, "I was cruel. I laughed with them. I called you names I never should have. And now everything's gone. I don't know where else to turn." I studied her face, the same face that had once smirked across the dinner table, gloating while I shrank. Part of me wanted to slam the door on her pain, to remind her of every wound she'd helped inflict. But another part of me, the part that had finally tasted freedom, knew that forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me. "I can't forget what you did," I said quietly, "but I can move forward. And so can you. If you want to change, start now." Her tears spilled, but she nodded. For the first time, I saw not a rival, but a broken woman searching for her own strength. As for my father, I never saw him again. Word spread that he sold off properties, scrambling to cover debts. His name faded from social circles, whispered now with pity instead of power. The man who once stood above me now stood alone. A part of me had waited my whole life for that sight. And when it finally came, I felt nothing. No triumph, no rage, just release, because his downfall was no longer my story to carry. Months later, I stood in my restaurant on its first anniversary. The chandeliers glowed, music filled the air, and every table brimmed with people who had believed in me from the start. Staff, friends, clients who had become family. I raised a glass, my voice strong. "To everyone who has ever been called useless," I said, my eyes sweeping the room. "To everyone who's ever been told they were nothing. May you rise so high that those words turn into echoes, fading into silence. You are never nobody. You are enough." The room erupted in cheers. And in that moment, I finally felt the thing I'd been chasing all along. Not revenge, not power, but freedom. Later that night, Ethan and I sat on the restaurant balcony, watching the city glitter below. He squeezed my hand. "Do you feel it now?" he asked softly. I smiled, the kind that came from deep within. "Yes. For the first time, I'm not fighting to prove myself. I just am." The cold night air wrapped around us, but inside I felt warm, whole, because my story no longer belonged to my father's cruelty. It belonged to me. And that, more than any mansion key or Tesla or title, was the real victory. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Would you forgive betrayal like this or walk away forever? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.